Ali will be leading this. Ali's he's been a product developer and designer since he graduated from North Carolina State with a dual degree in product design or in design as well as mechanical engineering. So he came at it with Cookie Monster blue hair when he graduated, but had the understanding and the intellect to know how to take those two worlds, blend them together, and to help create not only new products, but actually a new approach to businesses. So Ali's going to be interviewing or taking on this panel and discussing exactly how each of them have also come on their journey and creating the business that they have. So, Ali, over to you.
I think we have some microphone distribution.
Yeah, you can go with Omar. We've called each other worse than this.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's been pretty awe-inspiring day, personally. I think we've had a lot of information thrown at us, and I'm taking as many notes as I can. I'm trying to retain, I'm hoping 10% of what I'm hearing, but we got a great group here. I thought what we could do is maybe we can just briefly have you guys introduce each other. I think everyone here is tied to people in a pretty significant way, tied to different populations. So maybe we can just do a quick, a couple of minutes, each of you just kind of going through, and then would like to reflect on some of the perspective that we heard today, so I'll kind of feed you with a few questions, and after that we'll go out to see if there's some other burning questions that need to be answered out there. Why don't we start with you?
Yes, so hi, my name's Chris Patterson, and I'm co-founder of a company here at iAccelerate called Recovery Camp, and I've got a co-founder, Ellie Taylor, up the back here as well. And what we are is a social enterprise that really focuses on the education of future health students as well as mental health and impact in those two areas. What we actually do in our company is take away health students, so nursing students, psychology students, exercise science students, nutrition and dietetic students, away on their clinical placement where they're actually working in their experience, their workplace experience, with hours towards their degree. Usually these are in clinical hospital settings, and this is the area that they really first witness people experiencing mental health problems or mental illness. And so we really wanted to address a couple of things. Stigma that exists out there with regard to mental illness, and also making sure that we have an opportunity to provide something back for people who are experiencing mental illness as well. So Recovery Camp is literally a camp where we take the students away, people with mental illness away, on a camp for 4 nights, 5 days, and we live together in the Australian bush. And the workplace experience, the recovery-oriented opportunity, is people experiencing giant swings and flying foxes and rock climbing. And this is the experience that people use towards their degree and towards their recovery. Really, at the core of it, what we're trying to do, our focus is on making sure that people realise their own personal strengths, whether they are students or whether they are people with a lived experience, and the contribution that people can make towards mental health recovery.
That's great, thanks.
Great, hi, I'm David Landers. I'm with the Australian Federal Government and with the Australia Trade and Investment Commission. I am a entrepreneur in stealth in Austrade, as we're known. Indeed. So Austrade helps companies export. We attract foreign investment. We also promote international education. And my focus is on our international network. So I oversee our international network of 83 in-market teams throughout the world who work across those 3 mandates. Entrepreneurship is the single greatest untapped source of jobs, growth, economic diversification, and the creation of social value. So in addition to helping Australian businesses export in the more traditional sense, I'm very committed to the idea of using the platform of Austrade to help Australian social businesses do what they do internationally. I'm also a director of an organization called Grameen Australia. Grameen Australia is a social business platform, and we have so far three distinct businesses. One is a very well-funded microfinancing business in Manila. We also operate a poultry farming operation in Siem Reap in Cambodia. And we have a vocational training school, an automotive training school in Dhaka in Bangladesh, and we're actively on the hunt for other social businesses to build on our platform. I've been an entrepreneur. I built and sold a company in China during the 2 early days of the 1990s, a very large food cold chain distribution business. And Omar and I know each other from my days as a venture capitalist. I ran a venture capital fund for 10 years, which invested in very early stage or pre-seed fund stage technologies in physical sciences, information communication technologies. And I'm a proud graduate of the leading undergraduate school of business in America, Babson College. So, good afternoon.
Alrighty, I'm Natasha, and I'm from Catalysr. I'm the office and community manager there. Both our CEO and our COO are out of the country, so I decided to take this on. So Catalysr is an entrepreneurial program for migrants and refugees. Our main goal is to help those who come over from other countries who essentially face employment barriers, and we take them on, and it's a 4-month program. And by the end of the program, we want to unleash their potential and ultimately have them start their own business. And so throughout the program, we provide them with an office space, mentoring sessions, networking opportunities, as well as pathways to funding. So by the end of it, they'll be well-equipped and ready to start their business in Australia. It's broken into different stages. So there's a takeoff stage, which is for 4 weeks, and it's light mentoring, and that one is for free. And then once they start, they don't have to pay any sort of costs, but once their big business is successful, we just require them to pay it forward. So that's kind of the revenue model that we're basing it off of now. Things change all the time. So, but yeah, no, we're just there to kind of help them and extend themselves and overcome those barriers. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's John Harvey. I'm from Greenacres Disability Services. I'm the General Manager of Enterprises. I guess my proper title is I prefer to think of myself as someone who brings dignity to people who don't really have it in the forms of employment. My team operates a standard disability enterprise, and also, as of yesterday, we opened our 7th micro social enterprise, if you like. We employ over 240 people, varying in their capacity to work. And I guess I come from the background that I believe that work, I was talking earlier on, work is a scaffold that you build the rhythm of your life around, and people with a disability tend to be ignored in that process. And I think it's really important that as an inclusive society we can expose ourselves to disability and bring more people into that fold. So I'm a little bit of an imposter here. I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants before me, but since my tenure 4 years ago, we've gone from where we had one small enterprise, so if you like, which was making body bags, which sounds gruesome, but it's really good fun. You'll all see one day, don't worry about it. And now, as of yesterday, we have 7, and they range their services, their products, and they comprise of people with disability, a couple with people who don't have a disability. So that's sort of the range of what we do. And personally, if Joe's not here, I was going to take the piss out of him, but is that all right still? Yeah, because he hit my story and he's kind of mirror each other in many funny ways. Only mine's really daggy, and his seems more exciting. So he sort of had this wonderful. He had this great album that he bought when he was a kid. Pink Floyd. Who wouldn't want that? My first album that I saved up and bought was Bay City Rollers, City to City. So I don't think that qualifies. And I remember him. When he was talking about his sliding down. We were opposite, because I remember as a kid, up in the hill near my place, I had my little bike. It was summer, and we went around in our budgie smugglers all day. And top of the hill, and I came screaming down the hill, and I'd just been up and bought a paddle pop, and I fell off and I bloodied everywhere. I'm laying down there, and on the ground, and I heard the flutter of wings above me, and I looked up and I saw this sort of, what do you call it, sort of Radicus pesticus, a flock of seagulls came down, and they took my paddle pop, and so my epiphany moment was that I hate seagulls.
Thanks for that. I can't really follow that. I'm Mick. You heard about what I do like a minute ago, so I probably don't need to introduce myself any further, I don't think.
Okay, well, that means you have to handle the first question.
Okay. No
Will had talked this morning about serendipity.
Yes.
What was your moment of serendipity that something all of a sudden started coming together for you?
Ooh, there's been several. So it's really hard to choose. I think probably recently, well, not recently, 18 months ago, Serendip tapped on my shoulder, and I was invited to go to New Orleans as part of the Collision event over there, which is America's fastest growing startup and investor sort of conference. They had 7,000 startups that they chose from all around the world, and we were able to go, which was amazing. And I'd been working with Jason, who's the guy that codes in the barn in the UK, and he called me just before I went to the US, and he said, "Oh, I don't know if we can keep working together because I'm really interested in this virtual reality experience where you use mind control and it's kind of intertwined with your brain and looks at implants and things like that." So I was like, ooh, I don't really want to go there just yet. I'm still keen on the augmented reality. So we kind of decided that we probably would stop working together, and which left me really sad. I kind of felt like I was being broken up with. No, not really. We're still really good friends. But at the Collision conference, I was showing the really early stage AR to this guy from India who was in golf pants and a beret, and he was like the tallest Indian guy you've ever seen and just the biggest character. And he came up to us and said, "Oh my gosh, you're doing augmented reality, we do animation." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, we're really interested in working with someone in Australia." And I said, "Okay, well, let's work together." So we had coffee first, it turned into a meal, and then we've been collaborating for the last 18 months. We've built a team in India that handles all the animation and coding and stuff for my company. So that was probably a really great moment of serendipity.
That sounds great. Chris, your turn.
We're really quite young still. We're 6 months old, really. That's how old we consider the company. And at this point, Serendipity has really been around identifying a space that people really want, identifying that gap that people really want someone or an enterprise there. And that's been us. So for the last 6 months, we're really finding, wow, like we really need to kind of catch up to the want that is out there, the need that is out there. People really want our service, both on the side of university education for future health students, and definitely for people who are experiencing mental health as well. They recognise that there is a space there where they want to be empowered and give back to the education of the future health professionals as well. So realising that we have really kind of tapped into an untapped social market has just kind of blown us away, and we're really trying to catch up still.
That's great. John, I might put the same question to you about serendipity. You talked about many different enterprises that are kind of changing now.
Yeah, I think when you're in the space that we're in, we get a lot of people come forward to us with great ideas and thoughts, and you know, the deal of a lifetime comes along every day in my business, and it's that whole idea of sifting through and seeing where things fall in the right way, and if I looked at any of what I call the micro-social enterprises that we have, all of them have come out of these little serendipitous moments where things just fell together. You know, we're currently running a plant for a New Zealand company manufacturing a product for the frozen food industry. It came out of a quick conversation and a quick sketch, and before we knew it, it took 6 months to bring to fruition, but we turned it on last month. Another small conversation led to the enterprise we opened yesterday, which is in collaboration with the State Emergency Services. So these things come along, but you have the serendipitous moment, but there's that old Irish proverb, which is you can drill a hole through a stone if you piss on it for long enough. And I spend a lot of my time pissing on stones. And it's true that eventually, if you do that for long enough, you break through. But you've got to do it.
That's a perfect segue to my next question, because I was going to ask you what your superpower is, David.
Thanks for the question. I'm not recommending a career in government for you. One of the first things you learn in government, I don't consider myself necessarily a government person, although I work in government, but I had a long private sector career before that. But one of the things that you learn from ministers and learn in your media training in government is, irrespective of whatever the question is, you just say what the media team's already approved to be your message. So, yeah. Indeed.
So to preface my question,
Yeah.
so we heard from Joe that you have to, there is this superpower. You have to kind of understand what your superpower is and honor it.
Absolutely.
What have you done in your career?
What's my superpower?
Yeah.
My superpower is, look, I think we are at a very special it is a time of epiphany. It's a time where the whole idea of social business, if you even go back to 5 years ago, how many people were talking about social business? What was the thinking around social business? So it's gained a lot of currency, which I'm very happy about, because I see social business as addressing what has always been there, which is an acute market failure. We have for-profit businesses, and along any for-profit businesses along the continuum of those that really do have a triple bottom line and those that don't. We have NGOs we have businesses that are dependent upon grant funding and the benevolence of others, but that only gets you so far. So there's a real failure out there that addressing social need, and that's social business. So that's why, for me, my focus, both at a board level, my engagement with Grameen Australia, which was founded by Muhammad Yunus, who's the father of microfinancing, as many of you may know, but also my work in government, seeing social business as a very significant, perhaps the greatest untapped opportunity for addressing social impact issues. And the good thing about social businesses is that social businesses, if you get the model right, they generate revenue, which pays salaries and employs people, so it creates jobs, and it creates growth, and it solves a social problem. That's my government answer.
Natasha, obviously one of your superpowers is being brave enough to step in for folks that are gone. But what else would you add as really kind of some special techniques or things in the leadership of the group that's making it happen?
I think that the biggest thing would probably be my complete obsession with time. The co-founders, they're not always on top of it, so I'm always kind of pushing them. It's time for the meeting now, it's time for the meeting. And then I think that also kind of leads to my organizational skills. So I think that being obsessed with a Trello board and knowing what to do day to day, that really kind of drives the business and makes sure that we're on track and completing the things that we would need to be being done at that time. Because I think that a lot of times founders are so focused on things that are happening a year from now, 2 years from now, and we still need to accomplish these things today. So I think that kind of honing in and seeing those day-to-day operations and making sure that those are completed and really focusing on that is something that, I bring to the team. And
So, Michaela, I'm curious, social enterprise is something where it's kind of in this new emerging zone that we're talking about. For you, why does that fit for what you're trying to do, as opposed to doing something through pure for-profit business or as a charity?
That's a good question. So as a group, Indigenous founders and Indigenous business people, we always think about our community, always. That's the thing with Indigenous communities. We do what we do for the benefit of our communities. We often profit share with our communities. And a single goal of our business usually is bringing the community levels up to appropriate standards for our community. So I think it's part of our DNA, really. Dealing with cultural knowledge systems from other nations as well is, I couldn't work in the job that I do without considering profit sharing with them because it's their intellectual property. I guess I'm just the facilitator. I've built this technology. I've provided a gateway for other people to share their stories and create an income from it. So it's just an appropriate model for me. I wish I'd known more about business models actually when I started, because I went down the company route, which is just killing me in tax. So if anyone has any suggestions about how I can move from a company to a better business model, I'm all ears, because the business model that most people default into, because we don't have an education in business. We know a lot about culture. I'm an environmental biologist. That's my actual training. I'm a scientist. I'm not a business person. So, really struggling with the business side of things, but always wanting to maintain that profit sharing at a rate of 50-50. So.
John, you had mentioned when we were having lunch, just that where your business is falling in between that, those two different worlds that we're accustomed to seeing. So how is this social enterprise structure working for you, and why is that appropriate?
Yeah, it's tough in disability. We're effectively 50% funded, so we receive a stash of funding from the government, but they cut us loose for the rest. So we need to make up that balance. The traditional mode for a disability service is a congregate model. We bring a lot of people together and we do very simple tasks, and that's an effective way of using that human capital and doing something useful. But not everyone's suited to that, and as more product is made offshore, the opportunities for people like us diminish. So we need to find new models, so we move down this social enterprise model. It sort of sits in between there. It's on the spectrum, if you like, but each one is different, and each one has different capital needs, and each one has different social needs and personal needs, and you can't. I'm fortunate. I have to make a business case to my board, and the board give me money if they think it's a good idea. I'm not necessarily pitching to venture capitalists or anyone. I'm really internally funded, but it's still there's a lot of money involved in some of these. But we're constantly moving and changing and working out how do we support these people. And you can't run a social enterprise that employs people from a background of disadvantage without addressing that disadvantage. And so we spend so much time addressing that disadvantage in order to benefit the people that we do this for. So it is a different model, maybe not traditional, but it works for us.
I think there might be a few questions out in the group right here, so if anyone wants to give it a shot.
Having listened to some of your examples of what you consider your superpower, would you consider extending that to empathy and depth of understanding? A lot of your models have social implications and people at the heart of them, and perhaps you wouldn't do if you didn't have the soul behind it and that depth of taking the time for the depth of understanding for the disability, or for something that gives people with mental health the opportunity to educate and take away some of that social stigma. Would you consider that practice?
So just so everyone can hear, so I think you're asking a leading question that is one of their superpowers in order to be a social venture is to have empathy in their community. Did I state that right?
Yeah, and depth of understanding.
And depth of understanding.
Well, I'll happily take that one on. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, right? That's one of the most important books that I ever read, and I would recommend it to anybody who hasn't read it. And he makes the very good point about the centrality, the importance of having meaning to your life as the key to psychological health. I would love to get into a deep dive on this book. It's astonishing what this man went through in order to come to what seems like a very simple realization, but it is a very profound realization. So I think for anybody who's involved in social business, for sure, I think that's a big part of it. Is it really the payoff, the psychological return on investment is the meaning that you find all of a sudden present in your life. On the empathy side, and this gets back to your point about codifying things. You know, when I describe our social business, Grameen Australia, and take our microfinancing business in Manila as an example, unless you're right there in the slums, really understanding how these people live, what the challenges are, where the opportunity is and all of that, you can't design a system that meets their needs. And then once you do design that system, then you codify it so that you can replicate it and scale it. So I think that gets back to the question on the importance of empathy, which feeds into the business model. So you can't have a good social business model if you don't have the empathy with the social problem that you're trying to address.
I wish it didn't have to be a superpower. I wish it was something that was innate in everyone, because we spend, in the case of disability, and I think it's with most social sort of issues, is that because we're not exposed, we don't see it. We don't have empathy for it, and we notice that with the people that work for us, that as they move in the community, they're marginalised, and it's because people don't put themselves in the place that they are. So I wish it didn't have to be a superpower, but maybe it is.
I just wanted to touch on as well, I think Will's addressing it and touched on it a bit today, but addressing it a lot tomorrow. I think seeing the personal impact and as well as the community impact in anything that we do is almost the drive that keeps us going in our group, because that's immediate. It's hard to measure, but it's immediately visible when you're talking to individuals that have come into orbit with you, and it's something that really kind of keeps driving us forward.
Yes. And the question would be?
Is managing that expectations of customers who just care about themselves and what they're getting, and the fact that a social enterprise has a lot more moving parts than even a normal enterprise, and how they balance that in the business.
So how do we manage expectations in a social enterprise in the context of that? Who's ready?
Poultry farming and Siem Reap. The people who purchase the offtake from our farm, they are, the only thing they care about is that they get a quality product that meets their spec. They may or may not factor into the equation that they're buying from a social enterprise and therefore give some preference. But that's okay for us. But we are running a social enterprise. We are giving jobs to a community of people who are then in turn spending that community and giving other people jobs. It's a scalable model. We've codified it. But yes, the customer probably in most cases is quite objective about the purchase decision. So I'm okay with that.
I think we see it very particularly in our industry where despite the wonderful board reports with beautiful statements about inclusion and triple bottom line sort of stuff, when it comes to saving a couple of cents, we're out of there. We're pretty much pushed out, and that occurs with many big companies who state very clearly about their desires and wants to be inclusive. We get shoved and pushed like anyone else. So what we have to do is focus not on the fact that, hey, we have people with a disability. We focus on the fact we deliver a service and a quality service by that. And by the way, once the sale's done, look at what you've done also. You can't trade on, well, I can't trade on the fact that I have people with a disability. It doesn't work.
Yeah, maybe I can just add, and that gets back to the business model. So the business model has to be robust, because if the social business is going to be self-sustaining, you just assume that the purchaser of your service or your product, your offtake, is going to be an objective buyer. But you're running the business as a social business. So and that's the hardest thing to get right, is the business model. And in venture, Omar knows this, Omar and I worked together when I was in venture for 10 years running a fund. There was usually three things. If you got it wrong, it was one of three things. It was, you got the team wrong, you got the technology wrong, or you got the business model wrong. And I would say in 80% of the cases, you got the business model wrong, or more accurately, you ran out of runway. You ran out of time before you could get the business model right. And I think it's been said that an entrepreneurial-driven business will pivot at least 3 times before it becomes successful, and that's worth bearing in mind.
If you have a big picture and an end game, what does that look like? What's the ultimate end game for your organization?
The question is, what is the ultimate end game?
I think for me it's quite simple, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of the company, is that sustainable vision. We've got a vision, we know what it is, and if it's sustainable, we're quite happy with that. If we're continuing the impact that we're making now and can scale it up and is sustainable, that's it so far.
I think for us, our end goal is within the next 10 years have 20,000 micropreneur-led businesses. And so I think we'll be able to accomplish that by expanding both our offices as well as increasing the size of the cohorts and everything like that. So just really focusing on the quality as well as eventually the quantity and producing as many as we can.
Thank you. Thanks. The end goal for me is a few things. Firstly, it's the intergenerational translation of our cultural knowledge systems from the older generation to the younger generation. I think tech is a great platform to do that. Secondly, it's that our community across the world, Indigenous peoples, are fully educated on what it means to be digital, and so they're digitising in the right way that's going to protect their intellectual property and also secure their data as a financial resource for them later on. And the third thing is translating our cultural knowledge systems where it's appropriate for the community with everybody else. Like, we have at least 60,000 years worth of science experiments in our communities in Australia. We've got a lot of knowledge, and it's going to take industry a long time to catch up on some of the stuff that we know. So, yeah, I think we've got 3 things that we'd like to achieve from our company.
All right. Yes, in the back. Did everyone hear that question? Yeah.
That is a fantastic question. Question of the day, perhaps, because it feeds into my view about essentialism, which means it's not just about urgency. It's about doing the right thing at the right time and for the right purpose, and bearing in mind that every single time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So so ask yourself, what are you saying no to? So again, I talk about Grameen Australia. It's a platform, and it's a platform because we have a board and we have a management team that's very experienced at running several different kinds of social businesses, and we can leverage that platform to do other social businesses. And we're constantly disciplining ourselves as a board about, are we gonna grab that tiger by the tail or not? Or if we're going down a pathway, if it turns out to be a dead end, back out pretty quickly. So it's just a discipline thing that you would practice in social business in the same way, in my view, that you would practice it in a for-profit business or in an NGO.
I have an opposite view to that.
Sure.
I actually don't. I try and say yes to as many things as possible in the early stage of my startup, which has led me to amazing opportunities like being at the UN 2 years in a row and broadening my network and my horizons. I think things happen to you, like having the realisation about how lucky we are in Australia to be able to even do this work. I think it's a hallmark of a very privileged society that we can even start thinking about social impact and the impact that our companies and businesses that we have for our life can have a social element to them. So many countries are not afforded that opportunity. I think those perspectives in my life wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been working with these people that are experiencing things like, your whole tribe being assassinated by your government. I think I try not to say no to things. If I don't have the capacity, then I won't. And if I don't have the capacity to do it, I always find someone else who's in the Indigenous business community to take on that opportunity. So I like to share it.
This is exactly why we have a panel of people. Yes. Please.
I have a question. Being an entrepreneur, there's probably times your business isn't going to always in hands and you're not going to always get the investments you'd like for the business. So has there been times where you guys have self-doubted yourself or not believe that your business is going to in hands?
So the question was, has there been times of self-doubt?
Now. No. Yeah, absolutely. In our short term, absolutely. And part of that, I think, sometimes is maybe going back even to the question previous about one of my colleagues talks about chasing shiny baubles. And you can only really chase it for so long before you have to realise that you have to kind of quickly stop. And we've chased a few in our short term, and we've kind of pulled back because we realise that it's not the area that we want to go into. But I think what I've learned quickly is that's part of the game. And people tell you it's definitely part of the game is rolling with those failings from time to time. But it's hard to learn. But we're getting there, we think.
Anyone else?
No, I think, well, we fail all the time. I mean, I think it's just finding the right way to sort of land on your feet, which makes it more thrilling. Every time we do anything, last night or the night before, I was awake all night thinking, my goodness, what if this thing we open on Monday doesn't work? And we've done all the modelling, we've done everything we can, we've done the whole lot, and will it work? And you get there, you get nervousness, and you want to throw up, and because you know you've invested all this money and all these people, and you've signed contracts and deals, and you get there on Monday morning, and it's magnificent. And that's a really good experience. But there are times when you set it all up and you do the work, and it just flops. And it's you've got to be able to cut and run and think really quickly about I've got to cut and run. Otherwise, you'll just be in the hole for more and more cash, and you just can't afford to be there. So.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, like, as an employee, like being a part of an early startup, it's really hard, and I think there's a lot of self-doubt with kind of just the team itself and being around that environment. But I think that I've learned as time goes on that there's no sort of domino effect. Like, just because one person says no doesn't mean the rest are going to be no's. Like, you have to realize that you just have to move forward. So I think that. And at the end of the day, we're so busy, you can't have time for self-doubt anymore. Like, you just got to keep going on to the next thing.
I just want to applaud you girls for being here, because when I was at school, there was never an opportunity or any discussions about women running businesses. And as an adult, I find that really hard to deal with because I haven't been given the coping skills, or my horizons weren't broadened when I was your age. So I just want to encourage you, if you have a dream, just go for it. Don't worry about whether there's only boys doing it. Don't worry if there's only boy investors, because there is a whole community of women entrepreneurs out there. And they're starting great women's entrepreneur conferences and stuff. Like, I was talking to a lady yesterday who ran a conference for 500 girls in year 11 and 12 for entrepreneurship. Find those networks and they will just empower you to keep going. And it's okay to fail. Like, I've been in the floor in the shower crying my eyes out for hours. It's okay. Things will be okay. And, I think there's a Japanese saying that says, get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. And just finding that courage and conviction within yourself to do that. That in itself is one of those aha moments you have in your company that keeps you going to the next part.
And I'm going to get my counterpunch in here. So yes, and each time you get up, pivot. So don't just go back to doing the thing that wasn't working before, but I'm sure that wasn't, you would agree with that anyways. I'm revoking the best question of the afternoon. It's being taken away from you and redistributed to that young lady over there. Because you have asked one of the, I think one of the most perceptive questions that you can ask about entrepreneurship is, when is it time to, when do you realize that I'm going down a dead end and I need to back out of here? And I have seen, done a lot of investment, venture capital investment, and I've been an entrepreneur, and I have seen people who've spent their lives pursuing business models that just were never going to work. And you couldn't tell them, they weren't going to listen, and they just kept going. Maybe it was just never going to work. Maybe they just didn't pivot. But you got to know the difference between that and an experience that I had, which is when I was in China in the early 90s building this business, which was almost unheard of. These are the very early days of China. I built a business that required 25 million US in capital. And so I'm told I still have the record for the most number of venture capital pitches. I did 165 venture capital pitches around the world to raise the 25 million. There was a point in time, and it was April 1st, and I remember because my partner called me and said, Dave, we got the funding, all right? So we were out of money. And Monday morning, we were going to go in, and we were going to tell 150 Chinese employees that we couldn't pay them their last 2 weeks of wages, which was not going to be a pretty picture. And the money just can't, And so I said, look, Mike, I know it's April Fool's. This isn't funny, we got, And he said, no, we really got the money. And so we slipped through. So at that point in time, how was I feeling that Saturday morning when I woke up before I got that phone call? I was seriously doubting myself. And we got a little bit lucky. But there is not a perfect answer to the very important question that you ask. Both things are true. Sometimes you give up too early. Sometimes you should have given up or at least pivoted.
Any other parting comments from the panel before we finish out? No more Irish sayings? Thanks all. That's great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Before you go, I have a few gifts I'm supposed to give out here, so don't go away. John? Oh, thank you. Well, you can if you help distribute those. Ali, you don't get one. Sorry, buddy. And yours, John. And Mikhail, thank you. Okay, you're welcome. What a fantastic panel, and what a way to finish. As I look around the room, I think the women now outnumber the men, which talks a lot about staying power, stamina, and some of the strengths that women bring to social entrepreneurship. Frankly, which is why we need women not only involved, but we need women to be investing in some of these companies and that. And I understand from social demographers that the future is probably looking bright in that side because, as it happens, men fall off the perch earlier. So that means more women will be getting their hands on all the money that's left. And I hope some of them will begin to think about taking that money and investing it in some of these social entrepreneurship opportunities. It's a bit of a joke, but it's not really, because I think the power of being able to shift the relationship of investment and what we want in our communities, what we want for ourselves, has to change. I think we heard earlier from the people who were talking about the investment side, and I think we all probably sat there and felt, that's not going to work well enough for the future. The old model is not going to change. And I think Mr. Landers here said, if you expect a different answer from doing the same things, you're only fooling yourself. We have to change fundamentally some of the thoughts about what we value and how we can then expect that to change. And some of that is going to have to be driven by what we do value and what we expect then to help us deliver the outcomes that we want. We can't expect the old model to deliver that as much as we wish and pray for and everything else. It's clearly not doing it, In fact, many of us will argue that it has gone backwards. As the more we expect it to, the less it's delivering. So I'll leave you with that thought, but also leave you the optimism of look what the future might look like when we start talking about giving refugees a hand up rather than trotting on them, or thinking about getting indigenous people to think and help us understand better and more than we had before. And we think about it, at John's place. I mean, I've been over there and visited, and I really, if any of you ever have a chance, I never had more hugs than when I went around his factory over there. I mean, those people are so beautiful, and they are so willing to share that with you. So what we're talking about is really fundamental change, but it doesn't mean it's not business-like, it's not serious, it's not technological, it's all of those things, but it's also aimed slightly differently. It comes from a slightly different place, and I hope we all embrace that. Here we're doing this, and thank you for coming today. I hope you got what you might have expected. Can I see a show of hands if you think you got what you expected? Or maybe more? Okay, fantastic. It was our first go. We'd like to do it again. I think my team was saying, Omar, we're doing this again because we need a whole year this time, not just 3 months. So I promised them if we had a good showing here and people liked it, we'll do it again. In 6 months, we'll come back with a tune-up for those people who are going to be in the workshop. And then we'll do another conference probably in another year's time. So then we'll come back and revisit some of the bigger issues. And then we hope we'll do that in a sequence from then on if everybody's backs it. So we'll have tune-ups for those people doing it. And some of them may come up and help us on stage here and explain what they actually built in the meantime, the last 6 months. So those of you involved, please, if you're thinking about it, think about it more deeply. Those of you who are already on the journey, I hope you'll get the help you need to make that more successful. And those of you who just want to make this succeed, hopefully you find a way to help some of the other people find that journey a little easier to accomplish. Thank you so much for all of you. Also, I want to thank my team. None of them are here. They're all scrambling to get ready for the next section. So there is a dinner for those of you who have signed up for the dinner. At 5:30, we'll be having drinks downstairs in the lobby. And then tomorrow morning, of course, we start the 2 days of workshop for those of you who are in that. Yes?
What time's kickoff tomorrow morning?
Kickoff tomorrow, I think, was 8:30? Yeah. So those of you, bright and shine. Yeah, and we'll be back at the iAccelerate building, so don't come here. It'll be at the iAccelerate building, and we have 2 rooms, and we'll tell you which room to go to depending on which sessions you're signed up for. Thank you very much for attending today, and wish you all a good evening.